The silence in the church was overwhelming. The murmurs of the guests had turned into a constant buzz that drilled into my ears as I waited in front of the altar. My heart was pounding, my hands were sweating, and the collar of my shirt seemed to strangle me with each passing second. 60 minutes, I had waited a full 60 minutes and she hadn't shown up. "Sorry, buddy," my best friend whispered from beside me, his hand lightly squeezing my shoulder. It was at that precise moment when my phone vibrated. A text, just 3 words: "I can't do this." 3 simple words that shattered my entire world. My fiancée Lucia, the woman with whom I had shared the last 5 years of my life, had decided not to show up for our wedding. No explanation. No face-to-face. Goodbye, just a cold and distant text. I remember looking at the guests, their faces mixing with passion and embarrassment. My mother was crying silently in the front row. My father was trying to comfort her as he looked at me with that expression, that said, "Strong, son." But how can you be strong when you fall apart for inside? I left that church with the dignity of a shovel full of blows, the photographs that were never taken, the banquet that no one would ever taste, the honeymoon that would never happen. Everything became ghosts that would haunt me for a long time. The days that followed were a blur of awkward condolences and empty bottles. My friends tried to cheer me up, but their words bounced off the shell I had built around myself. "There are more fish in the sea," they would say, as if it were a simple fishing rod that I could throw back into the water. A week later, while cleaning our apartment, now mine alone, I found a box with memories we had saved together, movie tickets, small notes, photographs, and then I saw a survivor with the logo of an international company. I opened it without expecting anything special, maybe some promotion we had received. It was a job offer for Lucia in Paris with a salary that tripled what she currently earned. The date of the letter was 3 months ago. 3 months of lies of planning a wedding while secretly preparing her getaway. It had not been an impulsive decision. It had been calculated, cold, methodical. The pain transformed into anger and anger into determination. That same night, while I contemplated the cities from my balcony, I made a decision that would change my life forever. If Lucia had chosen her career over our love, I would also choose a new path, one that would take me to places I never imagined. 2 weeks later, I sold everything we had together and bought a plane ticket. Not to Paris. I would not pursue her like a jilted lover. My destiny was different. I had a plan, one that would require patience and cunning. The destiny that mysterious player who sometimes seems to laugh at our misfortunes had given me the first piece of a puzzle that I would complete. What I didn't know then was that that same destiny had prepared a coincidence so incredible that it seemed like something out of a novel, a coincidence that would bring me face to face with Lucia at the most unexpected time and place. And when our paths crossed again months later, it wasn't me who was heartbroken. Life takes strange turns. Sometimes it knocks you down only to get you back up stronger. Sometimes it takes something precious away from you to give you something priceless. And sometimes it offers you the perfect opportunity for a revenge you hadn't even planned for. A revenge so sweet and satisfying it makes all the pain worth it. This is my story, the story of how I was abandoned at the altar and how fate conspired to give me the most extraordinary revenge. A story about betrayal, pain overcoming, and that strange feeling of poetic justice that only real life can deliver when you least expect it. What happened next would change not only my life, but Lucia's forever. And it all began with a chance meeting in the most unlikely place in the world. I still remember the salty taste of my tears mixing with the cheap whiskey that night after selling everything. I had made the impulsive decision to travel to Mexico, a place where we had never been together, without memories that could haunt me around every corner. A small coastal town became my refuge, far from the noise, far from the uncomfortable questions, far from everything that reminded me of her. The first few days were hell disguised as paradise. The perfect beaches stood in stark contrast to my inner storm. I stayed at a small inn run by an older woman, Doña Carmen, who knew with just one look I was carrying a deep pain. She asked no questions, just offered me coffee in the mornings and conversation when I needed it. A broken heart is like an open wound, she told me one afternoon as we watched the sunset from her terrace. If you expose it to the open air, it will eventually heal. If you hide it away, it will get infected. Following her advice, I started opening my wound to the air. I started working in a small restaurant near the beach, waiting tables and practicing my Spanish with the locals. Manual labor Sun and Sea were my therapists. Every day that passed, I felt like a small part of me was beginning to heal. It was during my third month there that I received an unexpected email. An old colleague wrote to tell me about an opportunity business. A tech startup was looking for someone with my exact skills to lead a project in Berlin. The salary was generous, the opportunity unique. Under any other circumstances, I would have immediately rejected the offer. My life in that Mexican town had become comfortable, almost numb. But something inside me stirred. Was this part of the plan I had begun to form that night on my balcony, or was it fate pulling its invisible strings? "Should you go?" Doña Carmen told me when I told her about the offer. "Your heart doesn't bleed as much anymore. Now it needs to grow." 2 weeks later, I landed in Berlin with just 2 suitcases and renewed determination. The city welcomed me with its cold weather and vibrant energy. My new job turned out to be more challenging than I expected, but I immersed myself in it with an intensity that surprised my new colleagues. "You work as if you were escaping from something," commented my boss Hendrik, a pragmatic German with an unexpected sense of humor. "Or running toward something," I replied without giving him any further details. The truth is, I didn't know if I was escaping or chasing. The only thing I knew for sure was that every day I felt stronger, more focused, more determined. I was no longer the broken man who had left that church with his dignity on the floor. It was at a technology conference, 6 months after my arrival in Berlin, where the unthinkable happened. I was presenting our new project to a room full of investors and journalists when I saw her. In the third row with the shortest hair and an elegant suit was Lucia. Our eyes met for a brief second, and I could see the color drain from her face. My heart stopped for a moment, but my voice didn't tremble. I continued my presentation as if nothing had happened while my mind processed the information at full speed. Paris, Berlin. What was she doing here? The presentation was a resounding success, and when it ended, the applause filled the room. Amidst the crowd that came to congratulate me, I searched for her face, but she had disappeared. That night, while I was trying to fall asleep in my apartment, I received a message from an unknown number. "We need to talk, please." It was her, of course. After months of no contact, after having abandoned me in the cruelest way, now I wanted to talk. A part of me wanted to ignore the message, delete her number, and continue with my life as if that meeting had never happened. But another part, one that I thought was buried under layers of self-improvement, was burning with curiosity. I didn't respond that night, or the next. I kept her, waiting, feeling a strange pleasure, imagining her anxiety growing with each hour of silence. Finally, 3 days later, I responded with a simple where and when. We agreed to meet at a small cafe far from the center. I arrived 20 minutes late on purpose, and found her sitting at a corner table, nervously playing with her coffee cup. When she saw me, she tried to smile, but the gesture didn't reach her eyes. We stayed in silence for what seemed like an eternity. I wasn't going to speak first. She owed me an explanation. "You look different," she said, finally breaking the ice. "I am," I replied dryly. What Lucia didn't know, what I couldn't imagine, as she sat opposite me, guilt flashing in her eyes, was that our meeting was no mere coincidence. Fate had set the stage. But what was about to happen would change our lives forever. And this time, I held all the cards in my hand. "I never thought I'd find you here," Lucia murmured, her voice barely audible over the soft murmur of the coffee. Her eyes avoided mine, focusing on anything but my face. "It's a small world," I replied with a coldness that even I didn't know I possessed. Or maybe it's karma. Lucia looked up, surprised by the harshness of my words. I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. What I did to you, was unforgivable. She began, her fingers clinging to the cup as if it were a lifeline. "But I need you to know it wasn't because of Paris," Not completely. I arched an eyebrow, inviting her to continue with her explanation, although a part of me already knew that no justification would be enough. The job in Paris fell through after 3 months. She continued. The company went bankrupt. I was left with nothing, no job, no apartment, without you. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. And you expect me to feel pity? No, it's not that, she hurried, to clarify. I just want you to understand that I've paid for what I did, that I've suffered too. I took a sip of my coffee, watching her over the rim of the cup. The silence between us weighed like lead. And now you're in Berlin. Why? I left the question hanging in the air. I got a job with Globalch 2 months ago. I had no idea that you... Wait, did you know? Did you know I'd be at that conference? I didn't reply right away. The truth was complicated. After all, it wasn't just a coincidence that we were both in Berlin. The offer I'd received in Mexico came after I inquired about Lucia's whereabouts through mutual contacts. I learned that she had failed in Paris and was looking for opportunities in other European cities. When I found out she had joined Global Tech in Berlin, I pulled strings to make sure my startup would collaborate with them. The conference wasn't a coincidence. It was the result of months of meticulous planning. What's important isn't whether I knew or not, I finally replied. What's important is what's happening now. Lucia looked at me, bewildered. What do you mean? At that moment, my phone vibrated. It was Hendrik. Excuse me, I said as I read the message. It was exactly what I was waiting for. Are you familiar with the Nexus project? I asked, putting my phone away. The color drained from her face again. How do you know about Nexus? It's confidential information of Global Tech. A smile spread across my lips. It wasn't until 5 minutes ago. Now it's a joint project between Global Tech and my company. That's impossible, he whispered. I am the leader of that project. The board of directors assigned it to me personally. They can't. They simply can, and they have. I interrupted. The official mail will arrive in a few minutes. You will now be working under my supervision, Lucia. Her eyes opened wide, a mixture of shock and understanding dawning in them. You planned all of this. I neither confirmed nor denied her accusation. Instead, I took some documents out of my briefcase and placed them on the table. These are the new terms of the project. I need your signature by first thing tomorrow morning. Lucia flipped through the documents with trembling hands. This is ridiculous. They're stripping me of all authority on the project. I would practically become your assistant. Life takes many turns, don't you think? I replied, leaning back in my chair. I cannot accept this, she said, pushing the papers towards me. Of course you can decline, I conceded. But then I would have to inform the board of directors about certain details I discovered on your resume. Her face paled even further. What about your talking? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Your experience in system tech never existed, right? You made up that job to get your position in Paris and then kept it on your resume for Global Tech. Lucia looked like she was going to faint. How did you know? I have my methods, I answered vaguely. The truth was I had hired a private investigator months ago when rage and grief consumed me. I never thought I'd use that information, but now this is revenge, she murmured, a tear slipping down her cheek. I prefer to call it poetic justice, I replied. You chose your career over our love. Now your career is in my hands. I stood up, leaving money for both of us to have coffees. You have until tomorrow to decide, Lucia. Either you work on my terms or your career is over. This time I'm the one in control. As I walked towards the door, I heard her cracking voice calling my name. I stopped but didn't turn around. Do you really hate me that much? She asked in a small voice. It was a question I had asked myself many times over the past few months. Did I hate her, or was something more complex I was feeling? Without answering, I continued towards the exit. The cold Berlin air hit my face, taking the built-up tension with it. My phone vibrated again. It was Drick again. It's done. The board has approved the merger of the project. Congratulations, boss. A strange feeling came over me. It wasn't satisfaction as I had hoped. It wasn't revenge fulfilled. It was something more, something disturbing. As I walked away from the cafe, I couldn't help but wonder if I was becoming something I never wanted to be. That night I could barely sleep. My apartment, normally a refuge of peace and order, felt claustrophobic. Lucia's words echoed in my mind. Do you really hate me that much? As I gazed at the lights of Berlin from my window, an uneasy feeling settled in my chest. Was this what I really wanted? Would becoming the executioner of Lucia's career bring me peace? When dawn finally arrived, it did so with an unexpected call from Doña Carmen. Hearing her warm voice from Mexico was like an anchor in the middle of the storm. I hear you differently, she said after our initial greetings. There's something heavy in your voice. I couldn't help but smile. Doña Carmen always had that ability to read through my words. I found Lucia. I finally confessed. A prolonged silence followed my statement. And now what? What will you do with that meeting? He finally asked. Heal or hurt? Her question accompanied me the entire way to the office. The plan was in place. The Nexus project merger was now official, and in less than an hour I would have the first meeting with the entire team, including Lucia. If she decided to sign the documents, her professional humiliation would begin under my supervision. If she refused, her career would be devastated by the revelation of her lie on her resume. Both scenarios had seemed perfect to me during months of planning. Now, however, something didn't fit. The conference room was full when I entered. Expectant faces greeted me, some familiar, others new. And there in a corner stood Lucia. She had pronounced dark circles under her eyes, and her usual confidence had completely disappeared. Our gaze met briefly before she shifted hers to her documents. Good morning, everyone. I began in a firm voice. As you may know, the Nexus and Aurora projects have merged under a new strategic direction. While I explained the technical details of the merger, I couldn't help but watch Lucia out of the corner of my eye. Her body language revealed a mixture of resignation and fear. It reminded me of myself months ago, broken and hopeless after being abandoned in the to finish. I said after almost an hour of presentation, we need to reorganize the teams. Each section leader will receive their new assignments this afternoon. After the meeting, Hendrik caught up with me in the hallway. Impressive presentation, he commented, especially considering the personal circumstances involved. I looked at him in surprise. Let's go, he continued with a knowing smile. I know the story. I have my contacts. I know what she did to you, and what you plan to do now. I felt a chill run down my spine. My revenge was so transparent that even Hendrik had noticed. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied dryly. Hendrik shrugged. Just remember one thing. Revenge is like drinking poison, hoping the other person will die. His words haunted me for the rest of the day. By early evening, there was still no sign of Lucia or the signed documents. When the clock struck 6, my phone rang with an unknown text message. I need to talk to you. Not at the office. Tiergarten Park entrance this 7 p.m. The park was quiet at that hour. The Berlin autumn painted the trees in golden red tones, creating a setting almost too beautiful for the conversation I was about to have. Lucia was already there when I arrived, sitting on a solitary bench, her gaze lost in a small pond. I'm not signing your documents, she said without preamble when I sat down next to her. Then you know what will happen, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Lucia nodded slowly. I know my career will end, but at least I'll retain some dignity. We remained silent for what seemed like an eternity. In the distance, a couple walked hand in hand, oblivious to our personal drama. Why did you do it? I finally asked. The question that had been burning inside me for months. Why did you leave me at the altar? Why a simple text message? Why not? The truth is, Lucia breathed deeply before answering. Because I was a coward, she confessed. Because I knew that if I looked you in the eyes, if I explained myself face to face, I wouldn't have the strength to leave, and I needed to leave because of work in Paris, I asked bitterly. He didn't reply, his voice breaking because I was terrified of commitment, because every time I thought about spending the rest of my life with someone, even with you whom I loved, I felt like I was drowning. Work in Paris was just an excuse, an easy way out. His honesty completely disarmed me. For months I had imagined calculating selfish reasons. I never considered that fear could be so paralyzing. I lied on my resume because I was desperate, she continued. After failing in Paris, I couldn't go home. I couldn't face you. I needed to prove to myself that I had made the right decision, that the sacrifice was worth it. Her words resonated with me in an unexpected way. Wasn't I doing exactly the same thing, trying to prove that my pain was worth it through an elaborate revenge? Go ahead, Lucia said, wiping away a tear. Do what you have to do. Reveal my lie. It destroys my career. I deserve it for what I did to you. In that moment, I truly saw her not the woman who had abandoned me, but a human being as broken and confused as myself. The revenge I had planned so meticulously suddenly seemed small, petty. My phone vibrated with a message from Hendrik. The documents are ready to send to the board. I just need your confirmation. With trembling fingers, I began to type my response, aware that what I decided in this moment would define not only Lucia's future, but the kind of person I would become. Sweet revenge was within my grasp, but the price to pay seemed ever higher. You know what's worst? Lucia said, interrupting my thoughts. That I never stopped loving you. Even when I ran away from you, even when I lied to create a new life, I still loved you. And that terrified me even more. Her words fell like a lightning bolt into my heart. I looked up from my phone and looked her straight in the eyes for the first time in the entire conversation. What I saw there was not manipulation or strategy. I saw truth. I saw pain, regret, pulse racing. I finished typing my message to Hendrik. My finger paused on the send button. A simple tap and our fates would be sealed forever. Revenge or redemption, hatred or understanding, past or future. The sun was beginning to set over Berlin as I made the hardest decision of my life. The park was beginning to empty as the sun set behind the buildings of Berlin. The streetlights came on one by one, casting long shadows over us. My finger was still hovering over the phone screen, trembling slightly. What does the message say? Lucia asked, her voice barely audible. I looked up. Her eyes were red but serene, as if she had already accepted whatever fate I decided for her. I have two versions, I answered truthfully. One orders Hendrik to send the documents to the board of directors revealing your lie. The other one cancels everything. Lucia nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the pond in front of us. And what's stopping you from sending the first one? It was a good question, one I'd been asking myself since last night. What was stopping me? I had all the power, all the moral justification to ruin her, like she'd ruined me. Before I could answer, my phone vibrated again. It was another message from Hendrik. The board is waiting. They need an answer in 10 minutes or they'll assume we're moving forward with the original reorganization. Time was running out. The pressure was mounting. Every second that passed seemed to charge the air between us with an almost palpable electricity. Do you know what I was thinking as I waited for you at the altar? I asked, surprising even myself with the question. I was thinking about our future, how we would build something together that would be bigger than ourselves. Lucia closed her eyes as if my words were too painful to bear. When I received your message, I continued. It wasn't just the abandonment that destroyed me, it was losing that future, that version of myself that could only exist with you. A silent tear slid down Lucia's cheek. She made no attempt to wipe it away. For months I planned this revenge, I confessed. It was the only thing that kept me going some days, the promise of watching you suffer, like I suffered. My phone vibrated again. 7 minutes. I understand, Lucia said. And I don't blame you. I'm only sorry I turned you into someone who needs revenge to feel whole. Her words were like a dagger straight to my heart. Was that what I had become someone so broken that I could only feel fixed by causing pain to others. I remember Doña Carmen's words, heal or hurt, and Hendrik's revenge is like drinking poison, hoping the other die. 5 minutes. What would happen? I asked slowly if I didn't send either message. Lucia looked at me confused. I don't understand what would happen if we just let time pass. No revenge, no immediate forgiveness, just time. The board would assume you were going ahead with the reorganization, replied Lucia. I would still be working under your supervision, but without the humiliating conditions of your documents, and my lie would still be a secret between us. 3 minutes. The silence that followed was the most intense I had ever experienced. I could hear my own heartbeat, the soft murmur of the wind through the trees, the distant noise of Berlin traffic. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, I said finally. I don't know if I ever will, but I know that I don't want to be the person who destroys others to make themselves feel better. 2 minutes. I also don't know if I can forgive myself, replied Lucia, but I know that I want to try. I want to be better than the person who ran away out of fear. 1 minute, our eyes met in the gathering darkness. There was so much to say, so much to sort out, years of emotions bottled up in this crucial moment. The clock kept ticking relentlessly. What do we do now? Lucia asked, her voice mingling with the sound of autumn leaves rustling in the wind. My phone vibrated one last time. Time had run out. I breathed deeply, feeling the weight of months of planning, of cultivated hatred, of accumulated pain pressed down on my shoulders. At that precise moment, we had to choose what kind of people we wanted to be, what kind of future we wanted to build. Without taking my gaze from her eyes, I slid the phone back into my pocket without sending a single message. Fate, that mysterious player who had brought us back together, now watched us expectantly, waiting to see what we would do with this second chance. The Berlin winter arrived with its white blanket covering the city. 3 months had passed since that night in the park. 3 months that seemed like a lifetime. The snow fell softly on the streets as I walked towards my apartment after a long day at work. The Nexus project was progressing better than expected, although not without difficulties. That night in the park, when I decided not to send any messages, marked the beginning of something I could not have anticipated. It wasn't immediate forgiveness. It wasn't friendship. Rebuilt overnight was something more complicated, more human. It was a silent commitment to try. Hendrik had looked at me strangely the next day when I explained that we would not be going ahead with the drastic reorganization. Are you sure, he had asked, scrutinizing my face for doubts. You had everything ready for your perfect revenge. The perfect revenge would have been an empty victory, I replied. Working with Lucia was not easy at first. There was tension in every meeting, discomfort in every exchange. The other members of the team noticed it even if they were unaware of our history. Little by little, however, we found a professional rhythm. Her talent was undeniable, and I strove to be fair in my decisions. Coffee, the voice of my neighbor, an elderly German man named Otto, brought me out of my thoughts. I found him sweeping the snow in front of our building with a steaming cup in his hand. Thank you, I smiled, accepting his offer. Since my arrival in Berlin, Otto had become a constant presence, almost like an adoptive grandfather who always seemed to know when I needed company. You look like you're overthinking, he commented as I sat next to him on the small bench by the entrance. I received a job offer today, I confessed, in Madrid, a completely new project. Otto nodded slowly, blowing on his coffee. And are you considering accepting it? I don't know, I replied sincerely. Berlin has become my home, but there are difficult memories here, Otto completed. I nodded, grateful for his understanding. I hadn't told him my whole story, but somehow Otto always seemed to understand. Sometimes places don't matter as much as the decisions we make there, he said after a moment. You can run away to Madrid, Tokyo, or to the end of the world, but your decisions will follow you. His words resonated with me. I was considering the job in Madrid as a form of escape. I was still running away, just like I had when I went to Mexico after being dumped. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a message from Lucia. Meeting canceled tomorrow, we can talk. There's something important I need to tell you. My heart skipped a beat. For these 3 months, our interactions had been strictly professional. What could be so important to break that pattern? It seems someone requires your attention, Otto commented with a knowing smile. I said goodbye to him and went up to my apartment. The message of Lucia weighing on my mind. That night I could barely sleep, imagining 1,000 different scenarios. The next morning arrived with clear skies, a rarity in the Berlin winter. We had agreed to meet at a small cafe near the office, neutral and public. When I arrived, Lucia was already there with a folder on the table and a serene expression that I couldn't decipher. Thanks for coming, she said when I sat down opposite her. What did you want to talk about? I asked, trying to keep a casual tone. Lucia took a deep breath before opening the folder. I've received an offer from Global Tech. Do they want me to lead their new division in Barcelona? I felt a knot in my stomach. I was going to give up. After everything that happened, would she disappear from my life again? It's a great opportunity, I managed to say. It is, I felt. But before making a decision, I needed to talk to you. She showed me the details of the project. It was truly impressive, exactly the kind of challenge Lucia had always dreamed of. As she explained the technical specifications, I couldn't help but admire her passion, her brilliance. Despite everything that happened between us, she was still the smartest woman I knew. Why are you showing me this? I asked finally. Lucia put down the papers and looked me straight in the eyes. Because there is a second part to the offer. They want the Nexus team to join the project. That includes you if you are interested. The proposal took me completely by surprise. Working with you in Barcelona, working with me, but not under my orders and I not under yours, she clarified. How are we equal? 2 departments collaborating. The silence that followed was charged with unspoken emotions, possibilities, fears. Why would you do this? I asked quietly. After everything that happened, what I almost did to you. Lucia smiled slightly, a genuine smile I hadn't seen in a long time. Because these months working together have taught me something important. Second chances exist, but you have to build them, not just wait for them. Her words reminded me of Doña Carmen, her simple but profound wisdom. I also received an offer today, I confessed, in Madrid. Will you accept it yet? I haven't decided yet. Lucia nodded, understanding. I'm not asking you to come to Barcelona for me. I'm asking you because I think that professionally, we would be extraordinary together. As for the personal, well, we'll discover that day by day. We remained silent, drinking our coffees, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Through the window I saw how it began to snow again. Small, delicate flakes that transformed the city. I left you at the altar, Lucia said suddenly, her voice barely a whisper. And then when you had the chance to destroy me, you didn't. I don't know if we'll ever be able to completely heal what was broken, but I do know that I want to try. In that moment I remembered something Doña Carmen had told me in Mexico. Sometimes forgiveness isn't forgetting the pain, but choosing not to let that pain define your future. I looked at Lucia. I really looked at her. I no longer saw the woman who had abandoned me, nor the professional rival I had almost ruined. I saw a complex human being with fears and hopes, mistakes and successes. Just as I myself need time to think about the offer, I said finally. Lucia nodded understandingly. Of course. We said goodbye with a handshake that lasted perhaps a second longer than necessary. As I walked back to the office in the snow, I felt a lightness that I had not experienced in a long time. That afternoon I called Doña Carmen and told her everything. And what will you do? She asked after listening to me patiently. I don't know, I answered honestly. Madrid would be a new beginning. Barcelona would be complicated. Life is always complicated. My child laughed softly. The question is, which complication do you prefer? Running away or facing it? A week later, as I was packing my things, I smiled at the thought of the strange path that had led me here. From an empty church to a Mexican town, from Berlin to my next destination. Fate, that mysterious player, had moved his pieces in unexpected ways. Who would have told me that devastating day in front of the altar? That abandonment would not be the end of my story, but just the beginning of a much more important journey. The journey towards myself, I looked one last time at my Berlin apartment and closed the door. Outside, a taxi was waiting to take me towards my future. A future that, for the first time in a long time, was not defined by the pain of the past, nor by the desire for revenge, but by the possibility of redemption not only for Lucia but mainly for myself. And as the taxi advanced through the snowy streets of Berlin, I knew with certainty that regardless of the city I had chosen, I was finally on the right path. No,